Welcome back to the Everyday Armor podcast. Today we are in Tempe, Arizona. I just had a class a couple of days ago and my fiance actually came with me, so we were able to kind of make a trip of it. I have lost my voice a little bit. I was a little bit sick last week and then I was just like out and teaching classes, so I've kind of lost my voice. But we are going to proceed on with today's podcast, and I want to talk to you a little bit about like hotel safety. Now, there's a couple big things that I've really been able to put in place when booking travel, because most of my travel I do completely by myself. But I want to preface this episode with saying that I don't inherently think it's a dangerous thing to travel by yourself. I strongly encourage it. I think it's been one of the most empowering things I've ever done. And it's really helped me feel self-sufficient, independent. And when you travel by yourself, inevitably, you are stuck with so many thoughts you would have never even had resurface, or like things maybe you regret from years ago that you're like, why am I even thinking about this? But they're things you almost need to process as a human to move on from it and feel really sure in yourself. So I highly encourage it. And I think there's safe ways to do it. And I think there's also really big things you can do from the jump to make sure you're in a safe place. That way you don't have to consider a million little things once you're actually in your hotel. Now, I've been traveling for like 5 years by myself. I've stayed in hundreds of hotels across Marriott, IHG, Hyatt. I mean, any type of hotel, you name it, I've stayed in it. I've stayed in really nice places. I've stayed in very affordable places. And never once have I really had an incident where my safety was genuinely in jeopardy. And I truly think it's because I've trusted my gut and I've learned a lot along the way to make sure that I set myself up for success. And when I'm traveling, I don't have a ton of time to consider a million different things with safety. So I'm going to go through different stories that I've personally encountered, things I've learned from that, and also just some little tips that you can implement in your hotel room or while you're already out traveling, if it's something that's going to make you feel safe. And again, I want to encourage that you want to have as many layers of safety, and safety is never one size fits all, as we have always encouraged. So take what works for you and just always trust your gut. When things don't feel right, respond to it. So I'm going to start this episode off by just sharing some stories that I've had while I've been traveling. Now, my first one, I went actually to Baltimore. This, I think, was my first semester really like traveling. And I remember I booked an Airbnb. I went to this Airbnb and it was sold like I was going to be able to stay in like a separate kind of like casita house. And I show up and it wasn't separate from the actual house. I entered the back of the home and I had my own bathroom, I had my own bedroom, but the only thing that divided me from the actual house was like a little tiny gate that you would use for like a dog or children. And I didn't have a lock on my bedroom. There was no lock on the bathroom. And I just didn't feel super safe. And it's nothing about even like the people that owned the home, and they were home. I just, for some reason, for me, it just like, it was like, first of all, this isn't how it was marketed. And I just didn't feel comfortable, especially because like when I'm traveling by myself on a completely different coast, at that time I lived in California and I'm in Baltimore, I just didn't want to chance it. So I actually ended up completely losing money on that. I booked a hotel actually in DC and ended up having a really cool trip. But from that moment on, I decided I was never going to use Airbnb, especially when traveling alone. There are just way too many breaches for security. You're also not really relying on like an actual hotel company. There's not like employees there to help you that are responsible to their place of employment. You're depending on individual people who go through a company like Airbnb. So, and you also don't know like who has access to this. Do the cleaners, does the actual owner, where are the cameras going to be at? So to me, because there were too many questions that could go unanswered and too many places for security breaches, I just opted to never use Airbnb or anything like that ever again. Now, after that, I also had an experience in Pittsburgh. And I remember I had booked a hotel. It was a really nice hotel, but I didn't really look up the parking. And at that point, I'd only been traveling for like a year. So I'm like, okay, it doesn't really matter where I have to park. Like every hotel has parking, right? So I show up and I ended up having to park in like a public parking garage, and it was compensated, but it was still a public parking garage. And it was several blocks away from the hotel. And I'm walking in the middle of Pittsburgh, and I'll never forget, I had a class at like 9 p.m. So it ended at about 11. And I would have had to drive myself back here. And even when I had checked in, it was still dark, but it was in the fall time. So I don't think it was anywhere past like 7 p.m. And I was walking with my suitcase and I felt super unsafe. I was like walking like down a back alley. There wasn't a lot of people. I just like it wasn't a situation that as a single female traveling alone, I felt very safe in. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna take an Uber to my class and Uber back from it. It's worth the extra money. And that was again where I vowed to always look up parking. Is there parking on site? Is there parking like valet that I can do? What does that situation look like? Is there a garage actually attached to the hotel? Because I never want to have to be several blocks away walking by myself, especially late at nighttime or early in the morning when I'm having to go catch a flight. Next tip. I may have told the story before, but I was staying in Atlanta because I got sick. It was the only class I've ever had to cancel because I was like genuinely sick and unable to attend. And I think I got norovirus or I had food poisoning, but I had a connecting flight in Atlanta. I was actually headed to Louisville and I had a class at University of Kentucky. I had to cancel. It was so bad. So I couldn't even make my second flight because I was throwing up the whole thing. And I stayed at a hotel attached to the Atlanta airport. Now, I was so sick to the point that like I could not get out of bed. I was really unwell. I actually had one of the hotel employees bring me up DoorDash that my mom had ordered to the hotel because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even hardly look at my phone. And first of all, employees are able to access your room. You know, anywhere you stay, you have to kind of understand that because she was able to come in and I obviously approved it. She asked many times, is it okay if I come in? But, you know, she was able to come in and bring me my groceries. But then I actually went from that hotel to one right next door the next night. And I was sitting in my room. I was, again, super sick, a little bit better because it was the second night. But I had this guy come in. It was like a bellhop, and he was coming in to bring people their luggage up. And I was like, oh, someone's in here. And he got the rooms mixed up. So I think it's always important to understand that employees do have access to your room. And in both incidents, actually, with when I was sick and she had to bring my groceries up, I had my deadbolt on. So I had to somehow will myself out of bed to go unlock that. And when the bellhop came in, I also had the deadlock on or the deadbolt. So he wasn't able to fully come into the room, but he was able to try and open it. So I just think always having those layers of protection, and obviously both those people were not ill-intentioned at all whatsoever, but accidents do happen. So it's just important to have those deadbolts on, have those extra layers of safety just in case something were to happen, even if there was no negative intention or malice there. Next thing, I remember I pulled up to a hotel in North Carolina. I can't remember which city. I was probably like somewhere around Raleigh. And I was assigned a room on the first floor. Now, I typically, especially when you're traveling by yourself, you really never get put on the first floor. They'll always put you at least on the second floor. But I was assigned a room on the first floor. I had gotten there early. I was so tired. I don't know if I took a red eye or just didn't have a lot of sleep. And I went into the room and I remember falling on the bed. And it was like not just body odor, but like a sour, like nasty smell. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I look up at the headboard. I shit you not. I see two handprints on the headboard. And I saw these like dark, short hairs that like, this is so nasty, but they looked like pubes like on the sheets. It was just so gross. And I was like, no, if the first floor wasn't alone enough to get me out of there, like that definitely was. And I went out, I was like, this is disgusting. I'm not going to stay here. And I booked myself another hotel. And yes, it was gross and not necessarily like safety concerned, but at the same time, both of those things adding up just made me feel like this was not the right place that I wanted to stay at. I'd rather be out the $100-some than to be sleeping somewhere, staying somewhere where I don't feel not only like super safe, but also just like comfortable. I want to be able to sleep. I want to be able to feel like the sheets were cleaned. Like I don't want to stay somewhere nasty. So you have to be willing to advocate for yourself. And I really learned that trip. And it's funny because a lot of these stories I'm telling right off the jump are from like some of my first years of travel and lessons I learned and have always stuck to. Advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to do that. And sometimes, especially as like a solo female traveler, sometimes you feel like they're not going to take you serious or whatever else, but you have to be willing to advocate for yourself. I actually had this, that reminded me, another situation in Cincinnati, and I've never ever encountered this bad of customer service. This guy was, I don't even remember what the exact situation was, but he was telling me something about like my room reservation. Like I don't know what it was. He was so insanely rude. And there was another couple, and actually, ironically, the guy that they'd also like the couple that had an issue with this, um, he was actually the manager as well. He had played for the Bengals, and they were like, "We are not letting this slide. This was so not okay." The way he acted, he was like yelling at me. He was like, "I don't care," like so insanely rude. And I asked for his name, and he wouldn't give it over at first, and then finally did. I mean, it was really bad, and I had to like go through this whole thing to report the incident. He was so rude to me, and it was for something really silly. And I wish I could remember what it was. I think it was something about like I had booked the reservation. Oh, it was because I had booked it for the wrong day. And then I had called because at this time I was still booking through hotels.com, which is another tip. Only book through the actual like Marriott. Like I use Marriott, only book through them. Do not go through third parties. I'm telling you, it will save you so much grief when it comes to like any kind of incident. Or I had a class at Florida State in the spring, and spring of 2025, and I was supposed to go teach a class there, and it was really horrible. They had a shooting the day before, and I was in, I think, South Carolina, and I was supposed to fly there for it. And I was able to call and get it canceled and get refunded and everything. But like, if that was something through a third party, it becomes so much more difficult. Even I've had times where I've like booked it and then I realized that this was actually, oh my gosh, that's what happened. I booked it and I was at the airport. I realized right after I had booked it that it was the wrong date. And I was like, oh shit. So I get hotels.com to change it. It showed that it was changed on my app. For some reason in their system, though, it wasn't showing that. And I'm showing the guy, like, no, it changed. And I'm trying to like, and then he's like, well, I need the confirmation email that it changed. I'm like, well, it says it right here on the app. So I'm trying to find the confirmation email. And it was a whole circus. And he was just so insanely rude. So I really can't say enough. Advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to do it, even if you feel like they're not going to take you serious. Your voice does matter. And you have to advocate for yourself when you're traveling, especially alone, especially when you're not near people that can help advocate for you. Next thing, I was staying in a hotel in the middle of nowhere, and I think it was in Virginia. I can't remember exactly where it was. I can remember what it looked like though. And there was actually like a young girls like basketball team staying there, which was my saving grace because there were some really, honestly, like just creepy men in the lobby. And I remember they would like, there was one guy specifically when I had checked in, and he kind of waited a little bit and then like walked upstairs behind me. And I actually walked past my room and walked out the exit on the other side of the second floor because I just felt so weird about it. I like lugged my luggage down the stairs and like looped back around because it just felt so strange. And I was super far away from people. I didn't have good service. Their Wi-Fi wasn't even that good. And I just was like, you know what? It's worth it sometimes to pay the extra money to stay somewhere where there is civilization, where I can go get help. And also like just even for food purposes, I can easily go get something to eat. This was probably like a good like 40 minutes out of any civilization. So I highly recommend making sure that you're staying somewhere you feel safe, really know the surrounding area. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit more later. Next thing, this kind of goes into like advocating for yourself, but I had pulled into a hotel. This was in Gainesville. I'd actually taken a red eye, pull into the hotel parking lot, and there was this like deserted parking lot with just like some cars that were sitting there that were like making me feel a little uncomfortable. There was an abandoned building of some sort. I'm not really sure. And I just felt really weird. And there were people like hopping over this fence and like walking the parking lot. And I just felt really uncomfortable. They were kind of trying to talk to me. And I didn't even end up going into the hotel. I was like, I don't feel comfortable here. I don't want to stay here. I don't care if I can't get a refund on this. I'm getting a new hotel. And I went and found a hotel that was a little more expensive, but they also, and I'll talk about this too, they made it so like if you want to get to your certain floor, and I'm sure you've seen hotels like this, where if you want to get to your specific floor, you have to scan your key card. And that made me feel so much safer, especially if you're staying somewhere that doesn't tend to be like the most safe area. I would highly recommend that. Next, last story here, pay for valet. If it is like the difference of you feeling safe and having to walk several blocks to your own car, pay for valet. And this is something, again, you look up beforehand, right? This is one thing I really consider when I'm booking a hotel is, first of all, do I have to pay to actually park like in a parking garage? Is it complimentary parking, or do they have like the hotel I'm in right now? It's valet only. So there's not really I mean, unless you want to try to park on the street, you have to valet. They don't have like a parking area. So I always look that up beforehand. And this is really something that made me think about this. I had pulled into Memphis. It was really late. I mean, at least midnight. And I actually had like a really big red Wagoneer. So it was like, it was not like I was just in incognito. I was coming to like downtown Memphis, like late at night. And I pulled up to the hotel and was like, oh my gosh, I feel so unsafe right now. And they did have valet, but I don't think the valet was working at the time. And I'd gone and I was like, I really don't feel comfortable going to park my car. Can I please leave it here and I will come move it in the morning? And the lady was like, yeah, 100%. It was luckily a female that works there and she totally understood like where I was coming from. So I was able to leave it, but I was like, if I'm ever staying in a city again and they do have a parking structure you have to park in, I do not want to have to go walk that. Like if that's like where I have to stay, I'm going to make sure that I'm always using valet. I look that up beforehand. I plan on that and know the hours of the valet if there is like a certain point that they stop, valeting cars. So one thing kind of keep in mind. And I also stayed in Oakland one time and it was kind of the same thing where it was just not the safest area. And I mean, you can a lot of times tell, right? Like what kind of businesses are around. Are there a lot of businesses that are also out of business? And just what are the general crime rates? Like what does it look like around where you're staying? And this place in Oakland, it was weirdly like a really nice hotel, but it was not in the safest area. And again, I would have wanted to park on the street. So I just valeted. And this time I had known that ahead of time. So really just do your research. Think about all the little things, especially when you're traveling by yourself. So those are kind of the stories and the lessons I've learned through things I've personally encountered. I do want to share a couple other things that I really try to kind of consider or think about when I'm traveling, again, especially when I'm alone. Look at the neighboring spots. Know the general environment of where you're staying. Again, is this somewhere that's like downtown? Is this somewhere that's in the suburbs? Is this by an airport? Just know the area that you're going to be around. Know the surrounding like businesses, right? That's going to tell you something about it. I used to work out at Orange Theory and I'd always try to find a place near an Orange Theory because I knew it was like generally they were in like nicer areas that I would personally feel more safe in. So just be aware of that, be cognizant of that. You can always look for certain, businesses or like workout places that you might go to that to you feel very comfortable and safe. And just kind of, again, consider that. Again, I would never really say somewhere that's like super rural where there's nothing around it. To me, that didn't feel super comfortable. I didn't feel like I had a lot of options, whether it was, needed to get out of there or going to get food. So just know the general area of where you're staying. And I think too, when you're staying by airports and stuff, just understand that sometimes there can be higher rates of like car break-ins. So just make sure you're not leaving important things in your rental car or, your personal car if that's what you're driving to wherever you're staying to. Next tip here, just some like little miscellaneous things as you're booking a hotel. And this is kind of before you ever like get into your actual hotel. If you want to find, this is more for like a clean place, they always look for places that have flooring. So in this hotel, you can kind of see like there's actual floors because the more I stayed in hotels, the more I thought they probably aren't sitting there with carpet cleaners every time in between every single person. And it just kind of grossed me out. I have them somewhere. I bring slippers in every hotel I stay in. And I'm really not like a clean freak. It's something that does kind of like ick me out a little bit. So I always try to find somewhere with floors because I'm like, those are cleaned in between every stay. It's very easy. And also, even if like you're looking to like sit at a desk, like this chair that I'm in right now, it's like leathery material where it's all cloth, same thing. Like they're not like deep cleaning the fabric. So a little tidbit there. And a lot of times too, like they don't clean sometimes like maybe comforters like this, but if there's like decorative blankets or decorative pillows, they don't always clean them in between every stay. So another thing to keep in mind if you're somebody like likes a clean place to stay, I always look for the AC units as well. So in this hotel, there's not like one of those big, huge AC units, which does often indicate like an older hotel. And they've gotten more picky the older I've got. I just like to feel like I'm in a clean space when I'm staying somewhere. So if you see those like big AC units when you're looking up pictures of the hotel rooms and stuff, sometimes again, it does indicate a little bit older of a unit. Not always, and they could be newly renovated, but something that I do keep in mind. And when you're looking at those photos, go with the worst picture because you don't know which room you're going to be put in. So go with like the worst photo. If you see those like bright mustard yellow carpets and like, crazy walls or whatever, like go with those photos. Don't go with the newest, best, most renovated pictures either. Another little thing that I kind of mentioned earlier, the key access to get to your certain floor. If you're staying somewhere, again, that you don't feel the most safe in, like when I was staying in Memphis or Oakland or anywhere, even Baltimore, places you don't feel super safe, just make sure that you look up those extra layers of safety. That's something that's going to make you feel more secure because it limits access to your specific floor, which is also why I never stay on the first floor, which is something we'll talk about in a second because it's more something like when you actually get to the place, you can't always determine that beforehand. You can have like set like preferences, but you can't always ensure that. So there's just some little things before you ever get to the hotel to just kind of keep in mind. And then once you're actually getting to the hotel, our podcast manager, she had a situation where her family was accidentally given access to a room that somebody else also had access to. So like I mentioned before, it's something to just know that those little lapses can happen. You have to advocate for yourself, be mindful of those things, and also look, like, how are you locking your door? Like I mentioned before, using the deadbolts, are you using the extra locks? Are you bringing, I know Sabre has like travel safety stuff, or using like a door stop, or the extra deadbolts that you can add in as well, and make sure that those things are working too. Like if I had a room where those weren't working, I wouldn't want to stay there if I'm by myself. Some of the little things, looking if they have joining doors, that might also be something maybe you want to put an extra lock on. This room does have a joining door. I'm also staying with my fiance, so I'm not like thinking of all the things like I normally would be as much, but this one does have a deadbolt. So something to think about, is it something, again, you want to use one of those extra locks for? And just the general location of where your hotel is. There's probably going to be extra layers of safety you might use in certain places over others, where, if I'm staying somewhere I'm really familiar with, like if I'm staying in like Irvine, California is one of the safest cities. I used to live there. I'm probably not using all the extra layers of safety because there's just not as high crime rates. If I'm staying somewhere where there are high crime rates, I'm probably going to use a little bit more of those safety tips. In the floor. With the floor, like I mentioned a little bit ago, I really try to never stay on the first floor. And some people will argue this, well, you have like an easier exit or whatever else. But to me, I sleep a lot better knowing that it's harder for people to access my window. It's harder for them to access my door. If I'm staying somewhere where you do have to have key card access to get to my floor, again, that's just limiting the amount of people who can actually get there in the first place. And because there's less traffic, it makes me feel more safe and secure. And statistically, you are more safe and secure. So I always advocate for that. If I'm ever assigned something on the first floor, even like the story I told before, I'd ask for something on the second floor and they just didn't have it. And I was so tired. I had to get it and sleep, which ironically, I had to go to another hotel in that incident. But that's the only time I've ever been told there wasn't something available. So definitely advocate for yourself and try to do that if it's something that's going to make you feel more safe. Be mindful of people that are giving you, and I've only really ever had this happen maybe a couple times, because this is something that like anybody who's checking you in has been instructed not to do, to say your room number aloud as they're assigning it to you and checking you in. They're not supposed to do that. They'll be like, they can even say like, you're on the third floor and like slide it over in this room, but they're not supposed to say your room number aloud, especially if other people are there and able to listen. I have had this happen though before, and I've asked for a new room, like, hey, honestly, can I get another room? I don't feel comfortable people knowing what room I'm in, and I'll kind of like quietly whisper it. You have to advocate for yourself, and you can't feel uncomfortable doing that. So be mindful of that. Again, they are instructed not to do it, so you shouldn't run into that a lot. But if you are, and that's something you can report to, and maybe it was a genuine accident, but sometimes you calling it out and having that interaction can kind of point that out to someone that they shouldn't be doing that. I also will never say that like I just want one key. I'll always ask for two, especially if I'm checking in alone and there's like a man that's making me feel unsafe or something in the lobby. I will just try to say like, oh no, we'll have two. And I always use like we language just in case. It just makes me feel more safe. And again, especially if other people are sitting there and they're able to listen. With your stay, like during it, a couple little things to consider. And this is where, again, if you do all the background stuff, you know the area you're staying in, you know, just generally like you want to stay on maybe like a second floor, you know that all the locks are working, you may not have to worry about this stuff as much, especially if you have like limited key access to your floor. But some things to think about when you are actually staying there. I get DoorDash a lot. Personally, I have at times when I don't feel super safe, like maybe I'll like have it come to the lobby. I don't love interacting with like drivers. Just I don't know. I just in case. I especially at, like my home, I will typically do like have them like leave it, and then I'll go grab it, give them a tip, whatever. I just don't always love having that contact, especially when I'm away from people and I'm like in a new environment. So that's something that I prefer to do. Recently, especially if I'm staying somewhere I don't feel highly unsafe, I will put in my room, but I never come face to face with them. So to me, it adds kind of like a layer where they don't know if I'm one person or two people or even who I am. So that's, something that I would say use your better judgment with. Sometimes I'm in a rush or, maybe I would just rather not go down to the lobby and I will put my room number. But you have to do what's going to make you feel most safe. You can also use hangers to like lock your door. Sometimes they'll have like those like older deadbolts that like fold over like this from like one side of the door to the other. And with those, if there's a little hook, sometimes you can use actually hangers to kind of like almost like makeshift deadbolt your door, like double deadbolt it. You could do something like that. I've done videos of that like on social media. You can again buy the things like from Sabre to double deadbolt your door. But I would always make sure, even if you think you're super safe, it always have the deadbolt on because you just never know. And again, it could be a total accident, like the 2 incidents I've had where people genuinely meant well, but they just didn't know and they tried to come into my room. Next thing, don't be afraid to change hotels. Really, like if you're staying there, even halfway through your stay and you're like, I'm not feeling safe here, I don't feel comfortable, don't be afraid to cancel your reservation and go get another one. Hopefully, if you are traveling, even if it is for work, and you can always call customer service and let them know what happened, and hopefully they'll work with you. And I've had that happen majority of times. But hopefully when we're traveling, like the extra little bit that it might be to go stay at a new hotel isn't going to be detrimental when you're considering your safety. And if it is, reach out to me and let me know, because I would so much rather you be safe and okay than having to like withstand something by yourself, an environment where you don't feel comfortable. So try to change your hotel when you can. And one other thing too is saying your room number. That I know I kind of mentioned this before with like the person who's checking you in, but when you are, often I'll go get a water bottle or like a little snack down in the lobby. If you're doing that and you're charging something to your room, or maybe you're doing valet, try to be very quiet when you're alone about what your room number is, and go up to them, quietly say it, go up to them and whisper it. Or if you have like the thing they give you when you first check in that has like your room number on it, just show it to them briefly. Oh, here's my room number. That way you're not saying it aloud when there's a lot of people around. Obviously, if there's no one there, you don't have to worry about that as much, but just kind of be mindful of where you say your room number and how loud you say it. I have had incidents where I felt a little uncomfortable and it has been said aloud, like I've said it, and I kind of wish that I didn't. So just something to kind of consider. With peepholes too, on the doors, you can actually get devices that let you see in from the outside into the peephole, so you could like see from the outside into the actual hotel room. Again, not something that's like super common. So if maybe you're stuck somewhere, you don't feel super safe, and your room doesn't have it has a peephole but not a peephole cover, think about what you could use to like put over it, maybe a sticky note, whatever it is that's going to work to cover that peephole. You just never know. Not something to be super crazy cautious of, not something people are doing at crazy rates, but if it makes you feel more safe, it's something to consider, and something that I have done when I don't feel super safe. Always make sure you have space around you, whether that's like when you are walking through the hotel, hallways. If you are about to go into your room and you don't want to go into your room because there's someone that's close to you, wait a little bit. If you're getting into an elevator and you don't feel safe, wait. If you are going into the parking lot, I sometimes have parked in places that are for like the, high-end members, because I'm coming back at like 10 p.m. and every other spot is taken except for like in the way back of the hotel. I'll park in those spots and I'll go tell the person at the front, hey, I didn't feel super safe parking in the back of the hotel. I parked up front in one of these spots for like the diamond members or whatever. And they're always super cool about it. So I just always recommend having space around you, preserving your space, not letting people into it. And if they are and there's an incident, always report it. And if there's any tips that I can give you or anything that you might need to feel more safe, please let me know. And I just think generally trusting your gut when you walk in somewhere, if you don't feel comfortable with it, and I can't say this enough, and I know I've said it a million times already in this episode, advocate for yourself, stand up for yourself. You don't have to endure places you don't feel comfortable in. And a lot of times when you call customer service, they're going to understand and they're going to have your back, and hopefully they will help you as well. The point of this episode is not to freak you out. Again, it's to empower you. I love traveling by myself. I think it's one of the most empowering things I have ever done. And truthfully, of all the some crazy things that I've done also, and all the just experiences I've had to build my confidence or self-sufficiency, I think traveling alone throughout working with schools and starting my business, it has been the most empowering thing I've ever done. And I can't encourage it enough to people. And I always say this, but like, start small. I started going to hotels when I was in college. I'd feel overwhelmed. I go back a hotel an hour, 2 hours away. Or maybe you start off, you want to go on a little road trip, you go 3 hours and you go stay. There was a time that I went and stayed by myself in Joshua Tree from Orange County. So it was a couple hours away. Go do those little trips. Start off small, get comfortable with it. It can be very empowering. Just have these little tips in place and your little things that you do that help you feel more secure, and always trust your gut. And you can take it as being, too worried or scared or anxious or whatever. But I think that it's just learning how to trust your gut so you can live. I don't go to sleep in my hotel rooms feeling like somebody's going to break in. And actually, the National Crime Victimization Survey reports that hotels are the location for only 0.3% of violent assaults annually. It's a very small percentage. It does happen. It's a very small percentage, though. So if we take these different safety measures, these different layers of safety that work for you, it can help mitigate the chances something could go wrong. So keep that in mind. I hope that this inspires you to go plan a solo trip with some of these little layers of safety to maybe make you feel more secure with it. I'd love to hear your experiences. If there's anything else I can do to help you, whether it's like booking, maybe it's travel tips and hacks, maybe it's safety tips and hacks, please let me know. And again, if there's anything you guys want to see here, you want to be on the podcast, let us know down below in the show notes. We will also link to the door stops that Sabre has and the door locks. And if there's anything else that we can help with, again, just always reach out. Please make sure to like, subscribe, follow, all the things. It does really help us. Leave a review. And if there's anything that we can do better too, we always love to hear constructive criticism. Thank you guys for joining me here in Tempe, Arizona at the Westin. Also a great hotel. Highly recommend. They have a great lounge and bar on the rooftop. A great view. So I highly recommend it. And I'll see you guys next week.